Chairman, can you imagine a Netherlands where the state would collect tens of billions less in taxes every year? A Netherlands where a typical single income earner would have at least hundreds of euros more left at the end of the month. And where typical dual income earners would have even more. A country where a liter of gasoline costs €1 instead of 2, because that's how high the excise duties are. Where the VAT goes down again instead of up. Yes, Chairman, a country where, on top of a tax-free allowance of €30,000 for every working Dutch person, we pay only a flat tax of 20% on income. It is a Netherlands that is entirely possible. A Netherlands where a first-time buyer with an average income, a single earner, can actually buy a house, with a car parked out front and the possibility to start a family. Where small business owners can once again earn a decent living. Where companies thrive and where a full-time worker doesn't spend 2 to 3 days a week working for the government, but for their own future. It sounds like a dream. Like a utopian society that most people will consider unattainable and unrealistic. That's too good to be true. That's what we all want. That's how it's immediately dismissed. And so the Dutch accept their tight budgets, the housing shortage, the siphoning off of their income, the restriction of their freedom, and the slow but ever ongoing decline. But those billions of euros, Chairman, those billions that the state takes from us every year, are indeed earned by all of us. We are a very rich country, and we could actually have this money in our own wallets. If it weren't for the fact that it is currently being spent mainly on 3 major expenses, which no other party except Forum for Democracy truly wants to touch. We don't just want a different migration policy, a different climate policy, or a different EU policy. We want to stop them altogether. And we even want to reverse a large part of its consequences. You heard that right. We don't just want to stop mass immigration. So no quotas, no net influx of 20,000 or 40,000 or 60,000 people per year. But we want to undo the demographic transition as such. That also means starting re-emigration so that you get a net outflow, which not only saves billions of euros per year, but also secures the survival of our people. Just as people are now encouraged to leave their homes and come here, we want to encourage people to leave the Netherlands and return to their countries of origin with a remigration grant. Chairman, we not only want to stop all climate policies, because only a madman would flush away prosperity for 0.07 degrees Celsius less warming by 2050. While in the meantime, China is opening 2 coal-fired power plants every week. But we also want to reopen coal and gas power plants, make the Groningen gas field suitable for drilling again, and finally compensate the people of Groningen properly and decisively for the damages they have suffered. We want to dismantle wind turbines that have been installed and reconnect homes to the gas networks. This too would save tens of billions. And Chairman, we want to leave the European Union. No reforms, no negotiations, or new consultation structures. But to regain control over our borders, our currency, and our foreign policy. No more net payments to Brussels. Combine that with ending the nitrogen policy, ending the flow of money to the senseless bloodshed in Ukraine, and an overall downsizing of the government. And altogether we free up tens of billions of euros. It's really not that difficult. And yes, once again, I know what the majority of the House is thinking right now, that it can't be done. Yes, that's what you've convinced yourself of. You've convinced yourself that mass immigration is an uncontrollable natural phenomenon. It just happened to us. To quote former FVD Minister Henk Kamer. The total demographic transformation of our country just happened to us. Just like the apocalyptic reports from environmental fanatics on which our insane climate policy is based. Or the nitrogen policy. It just happens to us. Straying outside the established frameworks is unthinkable, impossible, unacceptable for the vast majority in this House. It's as if any other path lies completely outside your imagination. Chairman, some time ago I watched the film Goodbye Lenin about the shock that the end of communism meant for a generation that had spent its entire life in a planned economy, where scarcity was everywhere and freedom nowhere. Just as the people in the Soviet Union and East Germany could not imagine that society could also have a functioning economy, and so kept introducing more and more control mechanisms, which in turn always required even more rules. In the same way, Dutch politics also seems unable to imagine thinking outside the established frameworks. But what does that say about a shameless laziness and incompetence? Because, Chairman, politics is about making choices. The high energy bills, the lack of safety on the streets, the housing shortage, the decline in education, all of it is the result of the choices made here. The energy bill would never have been so high if they hadn't closed the gas and coal power plants. And if they hadn't filled our Groningen gas field with 500 meters of concrete. If they hadn't thrown the borders wide open, young girls would still be able to cycle home safely. Chairman, these are concrete consequences of concrete choices. But when those choices have to be made, when they can be made, here in The Hague, a smokescreen is consistently put up. Then, without fail, the finger is pointed upwards or outwards. Experts, treaties, international agreements, consensus. Take nitrogen, for example. The question before us is, how do we want to assess the quality of nature? Because more than 20 years ago it was decided that this should be tested using an unscientific nitrogen model, our nature policy has been completely stuck ever since. Chair, last week during the debate on integration, I proposed making social benefits accessible to migrants only after 10 years of work. Because it is only logical that as a newcomer to a country, you should contribute something first before receiving anything as a gift. The State Secretary's response was symbolic of the very problem I am describing now. He responded, and I quote, "Yes, but if you want to make a distinction, I cannot do that under our law." My suggestion to then amend the law was, to him, completely unimaginable. Well, that is precisely the essence of what Parliament, as the legislative power, can do. We, all 150 members of Parliament, are elected to make choices. We can choose to grant newcomers the right to benefits only after 10 years. We can also choose to abolish the nitrogen law and base the way permits are issued around Natura 2000 areas on empirical environmental data, as France and Italy already do. They don't have a nitrogen problem at all. We can choose to leave the European Union so that we not only regain control over our currency and the trade agreements we make, but also over who enters our country. We can choose, if necessary, as long as we are still in the European Union, to pay the fine that would be imposed on us for pursuing our own immigration policy, just as Hungary does. We can choose to protect the safety of our young women, instead of those of Syrian, Somali, and Afghan men who may need asylum. We can choose to reopen the Groningen gas field, and once again provide all of the Netherlands with cheap and reliable energy. Chairman, if the majority here were to say that they consider the well-being of Eritreans more important than that of the Dutch, then although I would strongly disagree, I would respect it more than what is happening now. Because the policy shows that the well-being of Eritreans is given priority. But no one dares to admit it. People hide behind international treaties. But who committed themselves to those treaties? That is the House of Representatives. And with the same ease with which those treaties were once approved here, we can also reject them again. This total lack of political willpower is also reflected in the election manifestos. Several parties have included in their election manifestos that they aim for a migration balance of 40,000 to 70,000 people per year. How did they arrive at that number? It was advised by the State Commission on Demographic Developments. Yet another commission to hide behind. Always that. Shifting of responsibility, that hiding from the consequences of choices made. But not making a choice or leaving that choice to someone else is also a choice. And the consequences of those choices turn out to be disastrous time and again. Chair, I am 28 years old, and if the current downward trend continues, I will belong to the last generation. The last generation that grew up in a recognizable Netherlands, where you could still earn a living in a normal way and build a life. The last generation that could still eat from the Dutch countryside, who still saw the beautiful coastline without all those wind turbines. The last generation that is not a minority in its own country. The last generation that perhaps even still sees a future in this country. Because indeed, successful people are leaving. Young people are giving up hope. Recent research shows that more than half, 58%, of 18 to 30-year-olds are seriously considering emigration. Trust has dropped to zero. The Dutch want a completely different kind of politics. The Dutch no longer feel at home in their own country. They no longer see any prospects for the future. They no longer feel safe. Half of the young women choose a different route when cycling home because of safety concerns. Chairman, the Netherlands is hurtling toward the abyss, and here in this House, the majority refuses to take responsibility for the future of our country. The course really needs to change. And not just a little. Not with half measures, patching things up, taking 2 steps forward and then 1 back, but for real. Sovereignty back, control back, from Brussels to the Netherlands, so that we can once again decide for ourselves about our borders, money, and energy. Stop the mass immigration and climate policies. An end to the destructive nitrogen policy and the unnecessary regulatory pressure imposed on the Netherlands from Brussels, so that the Netherlands can flourish again, and so we can pass on our culture, prosperity, and security to the next generation. On October 29th, Forum for Democracy offers that opportunity to the Netherlands. Put an end to decades of destructive policies. We are the only party telling a truly different story. Stand up for your wallet. Choose a smaller government, lower taxes, and fewer regulations. Stop immigration, climate policy, nitrogen policy, and interference from Brussels. We are going to become great again. And we start today. Thank you very much.